Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing the fate of the nation, the future of democracy, even women's rights hinge on a handful of votes, and a place best known for moose lodges and midnight ballots. Okay, maybe I'm being a little dramatic, but hey, it's election day in the US. Welcome to QuickCasters, your express lane to understanding complex topics. Today we're diving deep into what's happening as America decides who sits in the Oval Office next. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a minute of the action.
It's definitely a nail-biter of an election, that's for sure.
No kidding. For President Trump versus Vice President Harris. Talk about a showdown.
Yeah.
And right now, it's so close that everyone's glued to the results coming in from those 7 battleground states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina.
These are the states that could truly swing the election either way. It's all about which candidate can best mobilize their base and appeal to those undecided voters.
Right. And speaking of mobilizing, Trump's strategy seems to be banking on a massive turnout from his supporters.
He's definitely trying to recreate that energy we saw in previous elections. But the question is, are those silent Trump voters still out there in the same numbers? On the other side, Harris is hoping to solidify the Democratic hold on those crucial blue wall states, those states in the Midwest and Northeast that have historically leaned Democratic. She's really focusing on issues that resonate with suburban women and Black voters.
It's fascinating to see how both campaigns are tailoring their messages to appeal to specific groups of voters. Now down in the Sunshine State, things are looking pretty interesting. Florida is known for its, shall we say, colorful election history. But this time, officials are saying they're aiming for a super speedy count. Results by bedtime, they say.
Wouldn't that be a nice change of pace? Though it hasn't been entirely smooth sailing even in Florida, we've seen reports of some pretty strange incidents.
Right.
Like ballots mysteriously falling out of a truck.
Okay, now that sounds like something straight out of a movie. What's the deal with that?
Right. It's almost too bizarre to believe. Then there was an incident involving an 18-year-old with a machete near a polling place. Definitely not something you see every day.
A machete. Seriously. Okay, this is officially getting weird.
And to add to the mix, there's a story about a first-time voter who, despite being bothered by some of the things said about Puerto Ricans, is still casting his vote for Trump because he believes it will lead to a better life.
Wow. Talk about a mixed bag of emotions and motivations. Florida never disappoints when it comes to election drama, does it? But, as wild as those Florida stories are, there's a bigger, more insidious issue at play in this election, and that's disinformation. It feels like we're seeing a resurgence of those tactics that were used back in 2016.
Absolutely. And it's coming from both domestic and foreign sources. For example, a Russian group linked to the election interference efforts from 2016 was caught red-handed spreading a fake video alleging voter fraud in Arizona.
Ugh, it's so frustrating that these tactics are still being used to try to manipulate voters. It's a direct attack on the integrity of our election.
Exactly. And unfortunately, these efforts go beyond just spreading false information. The FBI has also been working to debunk fabricated videos, claiming things like terrorist threats at polling stations and rigged votes in prisons. It's a reminder that we need to be extra careful about the information we consume and share, especially during an election. Double-check your sources, folks.
Couldn't agree more. Being able to spot disinformation is crucial in today's world. Now, shifting gears a bit, it seems like there have been some technical difficulties and delays at certain polling locations.
Unfortunately, yes. In Cambria County, Pennsylvania, a software glitch caused major problems with ballot scanning. To make sure everyone has the opportunity to cast their vote, they've had to extend voting hours there.
It's good that they're taking steps to address those issues.
Yeah.
And ensure that everyone's vote counts.
Absolutely. And over in Allegheny County, a couple of polling locations experienced delays because election officials were running late. These things happen, but obviously, we want to see smooth and efficient operations at every polling place.
For sure. Any delays or disruptions can raise concerns and potentially discourage people from voting. We want to make sure everyone has a fair and equal chance to cast their ballot. Speaking of fairness, there have been reports of some concerning threats in Georgia.
Yes. There were 5 bomb threats reported in Fulton County. Authorities have determined that they were not credible, but they did lead to temporary evacuations at 2 polling locations. Thankfully, those locations are now back up and running.
That's a relief. It's so important that everyone feels safe and secure when they go to vote. No one should have to fear for their safety when exercising their democratic right.
Absolutely. It's crucial that we create a welcoming and inclusive environment for all voters.
Speaking of creating a welcoming environment, I think it's important to acknowledge the significant role social media is playing in this election, especially for first-time voters.
You're absolutely right. Platforms like TikTok have become powerful tools for young people to engage in political discourse, share information, and even mobilize their peers.
It's incredible to see how Gen Z is using these platforms to make their voices heard. They're not just passively consuming information. They're actively shaping the conversation.
Exactly. And it's not just about sharing memes and viral videos. They're diving into complex issues, learning about past political scandals they may not have been aware of, and fact-checking information in real time.
It's clear that this generation is highly engaged and informed. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo or hold politicians accountable.
And they're bringing a fresh perspective to the political landscape for many of them. Issues like climate change, reproductive rights, gun violence, and foreign policy are top of mind. They're passionate about these issues and are demanding action from their elected officials.
It's inspiring to see their energy and enthusiasm. They're a powerful force for change. And, speaking of issues that are front and center in this election, the debate over abortion rights is raging on, especially in states like Arizona, Florida, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Dakota.
It's definitely one of the most contentious issues on the ballot this year in those states. Voters are actually deciding on constitutional amendments that could drastically impact access to reproductive health care.
So this election isn't just about who occupies the White House. It's about so much more than that. It's about the future of healthcare, the environment, our democracy.
It's about the very direction of our nation. And beyond the presidential race, the battle for control of Congress is equally intense.
Oh yeah, the congressional races are definitely worth paying attention to. What's the latest on that front?
Well, the Republicans are looking pretty strong in the Senate races. They have what's called a favorable Senate map, meaning that many of the seats up for grabs are in states that tend to lean Republican.
So they have a good chance of flipping some seats.
Yeah.
And potentially gaining control of the Senate.
That's definitely their goal. On the other hand, the House of Representatives is a much tighter race. Democrats are fighting hard to maintain their slim majority, but it's going to be a tough battle.
It sounds like we're in for a long night, especially considering the counting process might take a while again this year. With the rise of mail-in voting,
You're right. Could be days or even weeks in some states before we have a clear picture of the final results. Remember what happened back in 2020? It took 8 days to officially determine which party had won the House.
oh yeah, those are some tense days.
Yeah.
Constantly refreshing the news, trying to make sense of the numbers.
Exactly. And don't be surprised if we see that red mirage phenomenon again this time around.
The red mirage, what's that exactly?
It's basically when the early results seem to favor the Republican candidate because of the way votes are counted. In many states, in-person votes, which tend to lean Republican, are tallied first. Then as mail-in ballots, which often lean Democratic, are processed, the numbers can shift, sometimes dramatically. So it's important to remember that those early results might not tell the whole story. We need to be patient and wait for all the votes to be counted before making any definitive conclusions.
That's a great point. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement and speculation of election night. But we need to remember that the process takes time, and accuracy is paramount. We need to let the officials do their job, ensure that every vote is counted fairly and accurately. Okay, folks, we've covered a lot of ground already. We've seen excitement, drama, confusion, and even a machete or two.
It's definitely been a whirlwind of a day.
But hold on tight, because there's so much more to unpack. We're going to take a quick break to catch our breath and gather our thoughts. When we come back, we'll dive deeper into some of the key issues that are shaping this election and what they mean for the future of our country. Stick with us. Hit that like button if you're enjoying this deep dive, and get ready for part 2 of our Election Day extravaganza. Don't go anywhere.
You know, it's fascinating to see how this election is playing out across different generations. It's clear that certain issues resonate more strongly with certain age groups.
It's like we're seeing the country's generational divides play out right before our eyes. And as you mentioned earlier, Gen Z is a force to be reckoned with. They're digital natives who are incredibly savvy when it comes to using platforms like TikTok to spread awareness, share information, and mobilize their peers. It's like they have this innate ability to cut through the noise and get straight to the heart of the issues.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that they're not just regurgitating talking points they've heard from others, they're doing their own research, fact-checking information, and engaging in thoughtful discussions about the issues that matter most to them.
Right. They're not afraid to call out hypocrisy or challenge the status quo.
Right.
Whether it's related to climate change, social justice, or economic inequality. For many of them, this is their first time voting in a presidential election. So they're bringing a fresh perspective and a sense of urgency that we haven't seen in previous generations.
Absolutely. They've grown up with school shootings, climate change, and a rapidly changing social landscape. These issues are deeply personal to them, and they're demanding action from their leaders.
Now, while Gen Z is definitely making their voices heard, we can't forget about the millennials, who are now in their prime working years and starting families. They're grappling with student loan debt, the rising cost of living, and the challenges of balancing work and family life.
Right. And these issues are shaping their political views as well. They're looking for candidates who understand their struggles and offer solutions to the problems they face daily.
It's a generation that's been hit hard by economic recessions and societal shifts, so they're pragmatic and looking for stability and a path forward.
Exactly. Then we have Gen X and the baby boomers, who are often seen as more moderate or conservative in their views.
It's interesting, though, because even within those generations, there's a lot of diversity of thought and opinion. It's not as simple as lumping everyone into a neat little box based on their age.
You're absolutely right. It's a mistake to assume that everyone in a particular generation thinks the same way. There are liberals, conservatives, and everything in between in every generation.
It's a good reminder that generalizations can be dangerous. Each individual has their own unique set of experiences and beliefs that shape their political views.
Exactly. What matters most is that everyone, regardless of their age or background, feels empowered to participate in the political process and make their voices heard. That's the foundation of a healthy democracy.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of the foundation of democracy, we have to address the elephant in the room: election interference and disinformation. It's chilling to see how these tactics are being used to sow distrust and undermine faith in our elections.
It's a serious threat, and it's something we need to be vigilant about. We've already discussed the Russian group caught spreading disinformation, but it's important to remember that it's not just foreign actors who are engaging in these activities. Domestic groups are also spreading false information and trying to suppress voter turnout.
It's almost like a virus spreading through our information ecosystem, infecting people's minds.
Yeah.
And making it harder to discern truth from fiction.
It's a great analogy. And just like a virus, disinformation can spread quickly and have devastating consequences. That's why it's so crucial to be critical of the information we encounter online and to make sure we're getting our news from credible sources.
We also need to be aware of the potential for voter intimidation and suppression. It's appalling that some people are trying to prevent others from exercising their fundamental right to vote.
It's a direct attack on our democracy. Everyone deserves to feel safe and secure when they go to vote. If you see something, say something. Report any suspicious activity to the authorities.
It's a collective responsibility to protect our democracy and ensure that everyone's vote is counted fairly and accurately. You know, one thing that's really struck me about this election is how deeply divided the country feels right now.
Yeah.
It's like we're living in two separate realities.
It's true. The level of polarization is alarming. It feels like we've lost the ability to have civil and productive conversations with those who hold different viewpoints.
Right. We're so quick to judge and demonize those who disagree with us, instead of trying to understand where they're coming from.
It's become all too easy to retreat into our echo chambers and surround ourselves with people who share our beliefs. But that doesn't solve anything. In fact, it just exacerbates the problem.
We need to find a way to bridge these divides and rediscover the common ground that unites us as Americans. It's going to be a tough road ahead, but it's essential if we want to heal this country and move forward together.
I agree. We need to be willing to listen to each other, even when it's uncomfortable. We need to be willing to acknowledge the validity of different perspectives, even if we don't agree with them. And we need to be willing to compromise and find solutions that work for everyone.
It's not about sacrificing our values or beliefs.
Right.
But about finding a way to coexist peacefully and respectfully, even amidst our differences. And, you know, one thing that gives me hope is the level of engagement we're seeing from young people in this election. They're not just voting. They're volunteering, organizing, and speaking out on the issues that matter to them.
They're proving that you don't have to wait until you're a certain age to make a difference. They're showing us what active citizenship looks like, and it's inspiring.
It's a reminder that the future of our country is in good hands, as long as we all do our part to protect and strengthen our democracy.
Couldn't agree more. As the votes continue to be tallied, it's a good time to step back and reflect on what truly matters in this election and beyond.
Absolutely. This election is about so much more than just choosing a president or winning seats in Congress.
It's about choosing the kind of country we want to live in, the kind of future we want to create for ourselves and future generations.
So as we head into the final stretch of this election and beyond, let's all commit to being informed, engaged, and responsible citizens.
Let's work together to ensure that American democracy, with all its imperfections, continues to thrive.
It's been an incredible day, full of twists, turns, and unexpected developments. But we're not done yet. As we anxiously await those final tallies, it's a good time to take a step back
Yeah.
and ask ourselves, what does this whole crazy election actually tell us about where America stands right now?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I don't think there's any easy answer, but one thing is clear. This country is deeply, deeply divided. And those divisions aren't going to magically disappear overnight, no matter who wins.
Yeah, it's like we've been watching these fault lines grow wider and wider over the past few years. And this election has just brought them into even sharper focus.
Think about the issues we've been discussing. Abortion rights, the economy, social justice. These have become incredibly polarizing topics, and the debates surrounding them are often heated and emotional.
It's like everyone's dug in their heels,
Yeah.
and it's become so hard to find any middle ground.
Exactly. And that lack of common ground can be really dangerous for a democracy if we can't even agree on basic facts or have civil conversations about our differences. How can we possibly work together to solve the challenges facing our nation?
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a glimmer of hope amidst all the division. Think about all those first-time voters we talked about, the ones who are so passionate about making their voices heard and creating change. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo
Yeah.
or demand more from their leaders.
They give me hope too. They're a reminder that the future of this country is in the hands of a generation that is more diverse, more inclusive, and more connected than ever before.
Right, and that's a powerful force for good. But it's not just up to the younger generation to fix this. It's on all of us to bridge these divides and work towards a more united and just society.
Couldn't agree more. We need to be willing to listen to each other. Even when it's hard, we need to be willing to challenge our own biases and assumptions. And we need to be willing to find common ground, even in the midst of our disagreements.
It's a tall order, that's for sure. But I truly believe it's possible. You know, one of the most important takeaways from this election, regardless of the outcome, is that we can't take our democracy for granted.
Absolutely. Democracy is a fragile thing, and it requires constant vigilance and participation from all of us. We need to be informed, engaged, and willing to stand up for our values.
We need to hold our elected officials accountable and demand that they represent the interests of all Americans, not just a select few. And we need to be wary of those who seek to undermine our democratic institutions and sow division for their own gain.
Well said. So as those votes continue to be counted and we inch closer to knowing who will lead our country for the next 4 years, let's not lose sight of the bigger picture.
This election is about so much more than just red versus blue or Democrat versus Republican. It's about the kind of nation we want to be, the values we want to uphold, and the future we want to create for ourselves and future generations.
It's a moment of reflection, a chance to assess where we are and where we want to go as a nation.
And it's a call to action for each and every one of us to do our part in shaping that future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Election Day 2024, let's all commit to being informed, engaged, and active citizens. Let's make sure that our voices are heard, our votes are counted, and our democracy remains strong.
It's been an incredible journey, hasn't it?
Yeah.
From those early primaries to the whirlwind of the general election. We've seen it all. The highs, the lows, the surprises, and the moments that made us question everything.
But through it all, the spirit of American democracy has persevered.
But that's something worth celebrating, even as we acknowledge the challenges that lie ahead.
So thank you for joining us on this roller coaster ride of an election. We hope you've gained some valuable insights, had a few laughs, and maybe even learned something new along the way.
Remember, this isn't the end of the conversation. Keep those discussions going. Stay curious and never stop questioning. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the topics that matter most. Until then, stay engaged, stay informed, and stay hopeful.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on future episodes. We'll see you soon.